I remember every single day watching YouTube videos, watching somebody getting huge payouts on Instagram, trying out new strategies week by week, backtesting, having the hype just to figure out I wasted my time again. And after every month, I was left with the same exact question. Am I one change away from becoming profitable, or have I just wasted 2 years on something that is never going to work? And the worst part wasn't even losing money. It was that the losses gave me almost no clear answer. Because in most cases, when something goes badly, you can usually see what you did wrong. In trading, you can follow the strategy perfectly and still lose. Then break one of your rules and make money. And now, what are you supposed to learn from that? I remember taking trades that I knew weren't fully valid. And instead of thinking, okay, I got lucky, a part of me started thinking maybe that rule wasn't actually necessary. That I would follow the strategy properly for the next few weeks and lose money. And suddenly the strategy looked like the problem. So after every bad period, I was stuck between two options. Change something or trust that nothing was wrong. And the funny thing, both can destroy you. Because if it was just normal variance and you changed the strategy, you just removed your edge. But if the strategy was actually bad and you kept trusting it, you could waste other 6 months and thousands of dollars. As you don't know what is broken, everything starts to look like the problem. The entry looks too late, then the stop loss looks too big. So you change one thing, you test it for a few weeks, and now the results are different because you still don't know if they are better. Because you changed the strategy before the original version had enough trades to prove anything. Then you do it again. And after a year, you have taken hundreds of trades on 6 different strategies. So it doesn't mean anything. And that was the position I was in for a long time. I was working constantly, backtesting, watching videos. But I still couldn't answer the only question that mattered. Does this actually work? And trading is brutal like that because it can make somebody feel productive for years while giving them almost no usable proofs. But somehow it still gives them just enough hope not to quit. And that is where it gets even worse. Because this is the part most people don't understand. If trading was terrible all the time, most people would quit pretty fast. But it isn't. Every now and then, something works. You have a really good week. Maybe you even pass a challenge. And suddenly all the pain before it start making sense again. You think, okay, maybe this was the one shift. Maybe I finally got it. Then a few weeks later, you give it all back. I had periods where everything felt easy. The setups were clear, I was following my rules, and for a moment I genuinely thought I was done with the losing streak. Then the results changed. I just got into a losing streak. Or maybe I started interfering again. But from the inside you don't really know. You just know that something which was working is suddenly not working anymore. And that small period of success keeps you trapped for much longer than failure ever will. Because now quitting feels stupid. You were close. You saw it work. So what if the next adjustment is the one? What if you stop 1 month before everything clicks? And that question can keep somebody in trading for years. Not because they are stupid or delusional, but because they have proof that it can actually happen. Just not proof that they can repeat it. Too much to walk away, not enough to trust yourself. So every good trade pulls you back in. Then every bad month makes you question the whole thing again. And once you get into that stage, a trade is no longer just a trade. See, when I was still losing, I wasn't only looking at whether the setup won or lost. I was looking what it meant about me. If the trade won, maybe I was finally getting closer. If it lost, maybe nothing has changed and I wasted my time again. So anomalies becomes evidence. Not evidence that one setup lost, evidence that maybe the strategy still doesn't work. Or worse, maybe I am the reason it doesn't work. Then a winner comes, and for a few hours everything feels fine again. Not because one trade changed anything statistically, but because it gave the hope back. That's why unprofitable trading is so exhausting. You're not necessarily reacting to the money. You're reacting what the money seems to say about your future. And once that happens, following the strategy gets even harder. Because now, you're not just taking an entry. You want the trade to prove that the last years of work worth it. So when it loses, the pain is way bigger than 1 hour. And when it wins, the relief is way bigger than the profit, which means the next decision is already affected. After a loss, the next setup feels more important. After a winner, you start wondering maybe you should risk more. And now the strategy is carrying something it was never built to carry. Your confidence. Your entire reason for staying. I remember days where One completely normal loss could change how I looked at the whole week. Nothing about the edge had changed. One outcome happened, but in my head, it felt like I had just learned something huge, and 99.9% of the time, I hadn't. That is the cruel part. The trader keeps getting verdicts every day, but none of them are reliable. And while you are trying to figure out what they mean, the rest of your life starts sitting in a waiting room. And that waiting room will last for years, because when you are unprofitable, your real life always feels like it's about to begin, after the next payout, after the next funded account. So making any other serious plan feels almost pointless. Why build other source of income if you are one adjustment away from finally making this one work? So you stay in between, not fully leaving trading, but not fully building anything outside of it either. And this was one of the worst parts for me, because every few months I had some reason to believe things were about to change. A good backtest, a strong trading week, and suddenly the future looked close again. So I will give it more time. Then the results disappeared, and I was back in the exact same position, except other few months had passed. I remember thinking that once I become profitable, everything would finally start. Then I could just relax. Then I could actually plan properly. But when the finish line keeps moving, then becomes your whole life. And the problem is, staying always feels more reasonable than quitting, because quitting might mean walking away right before it finally clicks. But staying might mean giving another 2 years to something that still doesn't work. And nobody can answer that question for you. People online will always tell you to not give up, but they don't know whether your strategy has an edge or not. So keep going can be great advice, or it can be the reason somebody wastes 5 years. And the same is true with quitting. Maybe the trader generally is one problem away from becoming profitable, or maybe the whole thing needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. From inside the situation, both feel exactly the same. And eventually the question stops being, how do I become more profitable? It becomes, how much longer am I willing to live like this, without knowing whether I'm even fixing the right problem? So I stopped asking whether I should keep going, because that question is impossible to answer when everything is mixed together. The strategy, the execution, a losing one could come from either one. And for years, I treated them like the same problem. If I lost money, I changed the strategy. But maybe the strategy was fine and I just didn't follow it. Then sometimes I followed the rules, lost anyway, and started blaming myself for something that was completely normal. So I needed to separate the two. First question, does the strategy actually make money over a large enough sample? For me, that meant manually testing at least 500 trades and 2000 later on with the exact same rules. Because before that, I didn't know how many losses could happen in a row. I had no idea how long a break-even period could last. So every bad week felt unusual even when it wasn't. But once the sample was there, then losses stopped being mysterious. I could look at the bad month and say, okay, this happened before. And if the data showed the strategy didn't work, that was also useful. But painful, obviously, but at least now I knew. The second question was whether I was actually trading that strategy live. Because a profitable backtest means nothing if your live version keeps changing. So after every trade, I compared what I did against the actual rules. Not whether the trade won, whether it was a trade I was supposed to take. And suddenly, the problem became much easier to see. Either the strategy had an edge and my execution was breaking it, or I was executing it properly and the edge itself was just not there. Both can be fixed. What destroys people is not knowing which one they have. Because without the answer, every loss sends them in a different direction. One week, they need more discipline. Next week, they need a new strategy. Third week, they need a new course. And they keep fixing the wrong thing. The real freedom wasn't knowing that my next trade would win. I still had no idea, obviously. But it was knowing what a losing period actually meant. Sometimes it meant nothing, just normal variance. And sometimes there was a genuine problem. But now I could tell the difference. And that is what finally removed the misery. Not motivation, not forcing myself to believe I was going to make it. Proof. Because you don't need to believe in yourself when you know the strategy has an edge and you can see whether you followed it. And if the numbers tell you it doesn't work, you can repeat it without wondering whether you quit 1 month too early. So you either collect enough evidence to keep going with confidence or enough evidence to stop wasting your time. Because being a losing trader is painful, but being a losing trader without knowing why is pure misery.